This morning, we will be hearing figures from the Home Office which will indicate whether the government has delivered on a manifesto commitment to recruit those additional 20,000 police officers. Have they hit that target? Well, let's bring into the conversation Home Secretary Suella Braverman. I'm going to try, but I would imagine she's going to allow her boss to make the announcement. But let's try and see how I get on. Home Secretary, thank you for coming on. Have we hit that 20,000 target? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. We're very confident that we are on track to hit our manifesto target, our pledge to recruit 20,000 new police officers.
Let me ask you, you will not need reminding, there have been some troubling headlines over recent weeks and months about the calibre of some of the men and women who have already been recruited. Can you give my listeners assurance that all necessary vetting has been taking place, possibly even enhanced vetting, to guard against men and women coming in who are less than desirable? Home Secretary.
Yes, we have extensive vetting procedures already in place. That's why we allocated £3 billion to support this unprecedented recruitment campaign. But if I can say a bit about vetting, it's quite an extensive process. There are quite wide-ranging checks that are carried out on any applicant before they're accepted into the police force. Checks on convictions and cautions, financial checks, checks on relatives and associates. That can take several weeks. And we do have a quite high degree of selectivity when it comes to recruiting. If you look at the application numbers, for every 10 applicants, only one will be successful and actually get through all the hoops that we present to them. So there is quite a high level of rigour that is applied in the recruitment and vetting process. That being said, I'm obviously cognizant of the challenges and the tragic stories and episodes that we've seen recently. And that's why I've instructed the College of Policing to update its guidance on vetting. And we're we're reviewing processes, we're washing data against the Police National Database. We're doing a whole load of things to reassure ourselves again and again that those who are not fit to wear the badge are no longer in the police.
And how is that continued? Because a man or woman could pass vetting this month and 6 months later actually start to bring the force into disrepute. So what is the intelligence that you want to see among senior officers that effectively the vetting or the monitoring continues?
We want to ensure that there is continual levels of monitoring. If you look at the Met, this is one of the aspects of the turnaround plan being led by the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley. And we want to ensure that if there are causes for concern about someone who's already within policing and they fall short, that there are appropriate disciplinary procedures to which they are subject, whether that's the gross incompetence procedure set out in the police regulations, whereby they'll be subject to appropriate disciplinary action. That's why I'm also reviewing the dismissals process. There are some concerns voiced by Sir Mark, actually, extensively, that Chief Constables are somewhat disempowered in their ability to dismiss and sack those police officers who are no longer fit to serve. I'm carrying out a review that's going to conclude very soon about the details, and if necessary, I'm going to change the law to empower Chief Constables to rapidly take action and dismiss those officers who are no longer fit to serve.
So there would be no upper review, effectively. If a Chief Constable, or indeed in the case of London, the Commissioner wanted an officer out, she is out, and that's effectively it, Home Secretary.
We need to, it's an open question at the moment. We're carrying out this review. I'm consulting and assessing exactly what needs to be done. So I don't want to prejudge the outcome of that process. But definitely, if you listen to what Sir Mark says, there is real concern amongst some chiefs that the appeals process, the independent panel, the legally qualified chairs, are undermining a chief constable's power to decide who is in their force. If the balance isn't right, then we'll change it.
Later today, I read in the Daily Telegraph, you're attending the Public Safety Foundation. You're giving a keynote address in which you'll talk about stop and search and common sense policing and back to basics policing. A little more detail, if you would, Home Secretary. What is back to basics policing?
Back to basics policing, or as I like to call it, common sense policing, is about responding and reflecting the priorities that the British people have. So we don't want to see the police, getting into debates on social media about gender. We don't want to see the police dancing on the street. We don't want to see the police holding back from taking courageous decisions on grooming gangs because of fears of political correctness. I want to see the police using their stop and search powers, their increased stop and search powers that we've given them, so that they can reduce violence and save lives. And we don't want them to shy away from taking those important and sometimes life-saving decisions in the name of crime fighting out of fears related to political correctness.
Aren't you fearful, Home Secretary, in some areas the increased use of stop and search alienates members of certain communities?
I think that we are incredibly, one priority of policing is to engage proactively with communities. That's why I'm very pleased that we have a very high number of people coming into the police force from ethnic minorities, women, so that we are reflecting the communities that we engage with. But political correctness, I think the public would agree that there's a perception that the police have been pulled off track on some instances, and particularly some high-profile instances. That's one example. That's one reason why I've introduced new guidance on non-crime hate incidents, so that we ensure that freedom of expression is protected and that the police are not overly policing lawful debate.
Well, I've got to ask you in that context then, of course, it took 5 officers to take a collection of golly dolls away from a pub in Essex. Have you spoken with the Chief Constable about that? What's your view of that aspect of policing? It doesn't appear to me to be common sense. Home Secretary.
Well, there's a live investigation on that matter, so I don't want to comment on the detail of...
But 5 coppers needed to take away a collection of toys.
Well, I do have concerns more generally about the police responding to complaints about hurt feelings or offence taken. I'm afraid lawful debate does necessarily involve people getting offended and feelings being hurt. That's not the job of the police. That's why the new guidance that I've introduced on non-crime hate incidents raises the threshold whereby police should take action, and only really if there's a serious risk of significant harm, which should mean, the rare circumstances should the police be taking action. But in the vast majority of lawful debate, lawful exchange of views, even where people may be offended, that really shouldn't be terrain for which the police should be involved.
Well, let's talk about the police should be involved in the job of the police, and I think we seek clarification from you, Home Secretary. You will probably have seen some of the footage of police attempting to restrain a driver yesterday in Whitehall in central London who was trying to move on Just Stop Oil protesters. Indeed, the protesters were walking at almost a snail's pace and at times stopped, but the police officer told the driver that he risked arrest. What is your instruction to police officers if they see the highways being blocked in this fashion?
I think it all depends on individual circumstances, and the issue with these militant protesters is one that I know many of your listeners and indeed myself are incredibly frustrated. These eco-zealots are selfish, they are disruptive, they're causing misery to many people who can't get to work, who can't get to hospital, who can't get to school. If they're causing a level of disruption which is serious, which meets the criminal threshold, then the police must definitely intervene and arrest. We have seen, incidentally, over recent years, approximately 1,000 arrests being made, hundreds of convictions. In fact, last week we saw, or very recently, one such arrest leading to a custodial sentence for one of the protesters who was hanging from the gantries on
Indeed,
the
but
Dartford tunnel.
if I take you to the streets of London, I think the new tactics is that I and my colleagues, were I to join this group, we're going to walk at a snail's pace. Should we be arrested for that?
I think these are decisions for the operationally independent police.
Well,
and
is there a law that
judge
provides
the
for their
facts.
arrest, Home Secretary? Is there a law
if it constitutes an obstruction of the highway, that will be the offence with which those people will be charged. But there is, as I say, a threshold that needs to be met. This is why we're passing the public order bill, soon to be an act. We want to improve and increase the police powers available so that they can take more swift action. That's why, incidentally, we tried to amend the level of serious disruption recently. That was blocked by Labour. They preferred to side with the militant protesters. So it's going to take us a bit of time before we can increase and enhance police powers in taking action against the very scenario to which you're referring, Nick.
All right, we've got a minute or so left. Let's move on to other matters. There possibly could be an increase in crossings from people fleeing the conflict in Sudan. You'll be aware of that, Home Secretary. Your colleague Robert Jenrick has said uncontrolled illegal migration threatens to cannibalise, his words, the UK's compassion. Do you concur?
I think that uncontrolled and unprecedented levels of illegal migration are totally unacceptable to our country and to our values. People getting on a boat unlawfully without a legal basis to be in the United Kingdom, paying thousands of pounds to criminal gangs, sometimes doing so tragically, fatally so, is unacceptable. And that's why the Prime Minister made stopping the boats one of his 5 key pledges at the beginning of the year. That's why we're introducing measures to stop this.
The question I was asking, Home Secretary, would you use a word such as cannibalise?
I think that the people coming here illegally do possess values which are at odds with our country. We are seeing heightened levels of criminality when related to the people who have come on boats, related to drug dealing, exploitation, prostitution. There are real challenges which go beyond the migration issue of people coming here illegally, and we need to ensure that we bring an end to the boat crossings.
And lastly, on that subject, the illegal migration bill is back in the Commons today, I understand, for a third reading. How embarrassing has it been for you to face so much opposition to this from even some of your own Conservative colleagues?
Well, I dispute that characterisation, actually. We're now heading into the final stage in the Commons later today. The bill has passed so far with strong majorities in the Commons. The parliamentary process necessarily involves frank and constructive debate. I'm grateful to all colleagues who've engaged productively with the passage of the bill, and I look forward and I encourage all my colleagues to get behind it tonight, but I'm looking forward to progressing with this important piece of legislation so that we can take action on behalf of the British people to stop illegal migration.
Totally contrary, of course, to the view of the Equality and Human Rights Commission that says the bill risks exposing people, including children, to serious harm.
I disagree with their view. The measures that we have proposed are lawful. They comply with international law, and actually they're humanitarian at core. They are about preventing people taking this treacherous journey in the first place. People are dying on the Channel trying to get to the United Kingdom when they really should not be doing so. They are leaving a safe country like France when there is no good reason to do so. They don't have a right to be in the United Kingdom, and we need to stop them doing so in the first place.
And Secretary Suella Braverman, I'm grateful for your time today. Thank you for appearing here on LBC. We're at 2 minutes after 8. Let's get the latest news from Thomas Watts.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman has told Nick that rigorous vetting has been maintained during